When did the invisible girl become everyone's dream girl? Alicia grabbed my arm the second we walked into freshman orientation. Listen, Maya. I know we're cousins, but that doesn't mean we have to hang out here. No offense, but you're kind of invisible. And I worked hard to get in with the right people over summer. She wasn't wrong. I had braces, frizzy hair I didn't know how to style, and wore the same 3 hoodies in rotation. Alicia had discovered flat irons, push-up bras, and Instagram angles. She'd already been invited to senior parties. Just don't tell people we're related, okay? She smiled like she was doing me a favor. It'll be easier for both of us. So I became nobody. Ate lunch in the library. Joined yearbook committee because they needed someone to take photos at events nobody else wanted to cover. Chess club meetings, drama rehearsals, math competitions, always behind the camera, never in front. Alicia dated Calvin Jenkins from sophomore year. Football captain, perfect teeth, going to state on a sports scholarship. She'd post their couple's photos with captions about my future husband, while I developed film in the darkroom after school. Maya takes the best candids, people would say, not remembering my name 5 minutes later. She's always around, but you never notice her. Perfect. I could study without drama, work on my photography portfolio without Alicia's commentary, join theater tech and learn lighting, start the film club nobody knew existed, build an entire life in the spaces where popular kids didn't look. Junior year, Alicia discovered I'd been accepted to the state art show. Why didn't you tell me you take real photos? She cornered me after family dinner. I need headshots for my modeling portfolio. I'm busy that weekend. I haven't told you which weekend. Every weekend. I'm busy every weekend. She laughed. Don't be petty, Maya. Just because you're jealous doesn't mean you can't help family. Remember freshman year? We're not family at school. Her face went red. That was different. I was trying to protect you. From what? From embarrassment. From trying to fit in where you don't belong. I went back to being invisible. But invisible meant I could change without anyone noticing. Braces came off. I learned about skincare from YouTube, not needing Alicia's approval to experiment. Cut my own hair following tutorials, figured out what actually suited my face. Started working out in the empty gym at 6 a.m. when no athletes were around. Saved money from photographing kids' birthday parties to buy a few quality pieces instead of many cheap ones. Learned that confidence came from competence, not compliments. Senior year started different. I'd spent summer at an art program. Came back with sun-kissed skin and muscle from hiking to photo locations. Still wore simple clothes, but they fit right. Still quiet, but not apologetic about it. People started noticing the girl behind the camera. Have you always been in our grade? Someone asked at the first football game. I was photographing for yearbook, but for once, people were looking at me, not through me. Alicia noticed too. Started showing up where I was. My cousin, she'd say loudly, throwing her arm around me when guys were watching. We're super close. Then Calvin cheated on her with a sophomore. Their dramatic breakup became school gossip. Alicia spent weeks crying in bathrooms, subtweeting about betrayal, making sure everyone knew she was the victim. I kept taking photos, kept not caring, until I developed the film from their breakup night. I'd been covering the basketball game when I caught them fighting in the parking lot. But the photos showed more than a fight. They showed Calvin pushing Alicia, her hitting the car, him grabbing her throat. Nobody knew I had them. Prom was in 3 weeks. Calvin was already dating the sophomore. Alicia pretended she was over it, but I saw her watching them at lunch, hands shaking. I had choices. Delete the photos, give them to Alicia, show them to the principal, or wait. The night before prom, Alicia showed up at my house. First time in 4 years. I need your help, she said. Mascara streaked. Desperate. Calvin's going to ruin my life tomorrow. He has this video of me, from when we were together. He says if I'm not nice to him at prom, he'll send it to everyone. I thought about all the times she'd humiliated me, called me invisible, denied our relationship. That's awful, I said. But we're not family at school, remember? Maya, please, this is serious. He's dangerous. You don't understand what he's capable of. I understood perfectly. I'd seen exactly what he was capable of. Had photographic evidence, actually. I have to get ready for prom, I said. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do. Her face changed. The desperation morphed into something darker. You think you're better than me now? Because a few people finally noticed you exist? Goodbye, Alicia. She stood on my porch, voice dropping to a whisper. You're going to regret this. I made you invisible once. I can do it again. But this time, it'll be permanent. I closed the door and locked it. My hands didn't shake. I walked straight to the basement where my dark room waited in its familiar chemical smell and red safety light. The film from the parking lot sat in my camera bag where I'd left it 3 days ago, waiting for me to decide what to do with it. Now I knew. I pulled the film canister out and loaded it onto the developing reel in the pitch black of my changing bag. My fingers moved through the familiar motions while my brain stayed quiet and focused. Load the film, seal the tank. Mix the developer to exactly 68 degrees. Pour it in. Agitate for 10 seconds every 30. The process took 20 minutes but felt like no time at all. When I poured in the stop bath, the sharp vinegar smell filled the small space. Then the fixer, Then the final wash. I hung the negatives to dry and waited another 30 minutes, sitting on the wooden stool in the red light, not thinking about Alicia's threat, or Tucker's violence, or what I was about to see. Just waiting. When the negatives were dry enough to handle, I cut them into strips and held them up to the light. The images were there in perfect detail. Tucker's hands around Alicia's throat, her head snapping back against the car, his grip getting tighter, her fingers clawing at his arms. The sequence showed everything. 5 frames of clear, undeniable violence. I made one set of prints, watching each image appear in the developer tray like evidence rising from nothing. His face showed anger. Her face showed fear. The parking lot lights gave me enough exposure to capture both. I dried the prints with the hairdryer, watching the paper curl slightly at the edges. Then I put them in a manila folder, wrote Landscape Project 2024 on the tab in my regular handwriting, and filed it between my actual landscape work and my portrait studies. The negatives went into my fire safe in the back of my closet, the one I'd bought with birthday money to store my best work. I spun the combination lock and went to bed at 2 a.m. smelling like chemicals. I woke up the next morning with my hands still carrying the developer smell no matter how much I'd scrubbed them. The scent was stuck in my nail beds and the creases of my palms. I lay in bed running through my options like a film loop playing over and over. I could delete everything, pretend I never saw it, let Alicia and Tucker and Piper figure out their own mess without me. I could give the photos to Alicia and let her decide what to do with evidence of her own assault. I could take them straight to Principal Meadows and trigger whatever official process the school had for this kind of thing. Or I could wait and see what Tucker did next while I prepared everything properly. The waiting option felt wrong and right at the same time. Wrong because someone might get hurt while I sat on evidence. Right because rushing into this without thinking it through could make everything worse. I chose to wait, but I wasn't waiting passively. I was preparing. I got up and made a list in my notebook of everything I needed to do. Document the chain of custody. Research school policies. Create backup copies. Build a timeline. Gather any other evidence I could find. The list filled 2 pages. My phone showed 3 texts from Alicia, all sent after midnight. I didn't mean what I said. Then, I was just upset. Then, we're still family. I didn't respond. I got dressed and went to the school. The yearbook meeting that afternoon happened in the journalism classroom where Jen kept all our equipment locked in cabinets along the back wall. 15 of us sat in the desks arranged in a circle while Jen went through the assignment list for the last month of school. Senior awards assembly. Spring sports finals. Drama club's last performance. Prom. When she got to prom, she looked directly at me and said I'd be the primary photographer, which meant I'd be there all night with my camera and my official yearbook press pass. My stomach dropped because this raised my visibility and my risk. Everyone would see me. Tucker would see me. But I nodded and wrote it down in my assignment notebook like it was just another event. Across the room, Raphael caught my eye and mouthed something that looked like, "You okay?" I gave him a small nod. The meeting ended and people packed up their stuff. Raphael walked over and stood next to my desk while I put my notebook away. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just said, "Coffee after this?" And I said, "Can't. I have to get home." Which was true, but also I wasn't ready to talk to anyone about what I knew. During lunch the next day, Alicia performed her usual routine. I sat at my regular spot near the windows with my sandwich and my physics homework. She walked past with her friends, saw some guys from the soccer team at the next table, and suddenly changed direction. She threw her arm around my shoulders and said loudly, "Hey cuz, you coming to my prom thing on Saturday?" Her friends stopped and turned. The soccer guys looked over. I felt her arm heavy across my shoulders, felt her fingers grip my upper arm to keep me from moving away. She kept talking about prom plans and after parties and who was riding in which limo. The second the soccer guys lost interest and went back to their food, she dropped her arm and stepped back. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling without looking at me. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't acknowledge that I was still sitting there. I went back to my physics problems. I felt nothing. Not anger or hurt or even the old familiar sting of being used. Just the familiar numbness of being a prop in her social theater. She walked away with her friends and I finished my lunch in the quiet space she'd left behind. By the end of the week, the hallway energy changed. People noticed things about Tucker and Piper. How he always stood between her and other people. How she'd stopped sitting with her sophomore friends at lunch. How he checked her phone while she ate. How she looked down at the floor when he talked. The rumors started small but grew fast. "Did you see how he grabbed her arm?" Someone said at the water fountain. "She seems scared of him," someone else said in the bathroom. But other people defended him. "He's just protective. She's lucky to be with him." Stop trying to start drama. I watched it all from behind my camera at the chess club fundraiser on Friday afternoon. I was supposed to be taking pictures of the bake sale and the tournament brackets, but I kept seeing Tucker and Piper in my peripheral vision. He stood too close. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to be smaller. When her friend from math class tried to talk to her, Tucker steered her away with his hand on her lower back. I took pictures of the chess players and the cookies and the donation jar, staying detached but quietly concerned about how Piper's body language had changed in just 2 weeks. On Saturday, I sat in my room with my notebook and wrote out every option with brutal honesty. Delete the photos means someone else gets hurt, and I could have stopped it. Give them to Alicia means she might use them for revenge instead of safety. Might post them on social media or send them to Tucker's college or do something impulsive that makes everything worse. Go to administration means proper process but slow. Means adults taking over and maybe not believing me or not acting fast enough. Wait means I can control the timing and the documentation. Means I can make sure everything is done right. I chose to wait while preparing all the evidence properly. The decision felt selfish. I was keeping information that could help people because I wanted to make sure I did it perfectly. But rushing felt more dangerous than waiting. I wrote out a plan. Make backup copies, document everything, research policies, build a timeline, create a safety plan. The waiting made me feel sick, but the plan made me feel less helpless. Monday during study hall, I pulled up the school handbook on my laptop and read through the harassment and assault policies, the mandatory reporting requirements, the investigation procedures. The language was formal and careful, full of words like alleged and appropriate measures, and due process. I realized that documentation mattered, dates and times and witnesses and chain of custody. I needed to treat this like the serious evidence it was. My hands shook while I took notes in the back pages of my physics notebook where no one would see. The anxiety mixed with a weird calm that came from having a concrete plan. I learned that teachers were mandatory reporters, that the school had to investigate any report of violence, that there were specific forms and procedures, that confidentiality was protected but not guaranteed. I copied down the relevant policy numbers and the name of the Title IX coordinator. I saved the handbook page as a PDF. I added everything to a folder on my laptop labeled Research Project. That evening, Alicia posted a long Instagram story. 10 slides of sad song lyrics and photos of her looking vulnerable and beautiful. Sometimes the people you love the most hurt you the deepest. Moving on is hard, but staying is harder. I deserve better, and I'm finally realizing it. The photos showed her in soft lighting with perfect makeup that made her eyes look bigger and sadder. There was no mention of Tucker's violence. No hint that she was scared of him. No acknowledgement of what had actually happened in that parking lot. Just performance of victimhood about being cheated on. I took screenshots of the whole story, every slide, and saved them in my documentation folder. The date stamp showed Monday, April 15th, 8:47 p.m. I felt frustrated that she was rewriting what actually happened, turning assault into heartbreak. But I understood why. Admitting you were a victim of violence was harder than admitting you got cheated on. One made you look weak, the other made you look sympathetic. She was protecting herself the only way she knew how. The following week compressed with yearbook deadlines. I had to shoot the senior awards assembly on Tuesday, drama rehearsal on Wednesday, JV baseball on Thursday, varsity softball on Friday, track meet on Saturday. Every event meant I was visible with my camera, meant people saw me and sometimes talked to me and sometimes asked me to take their picture. The stress of being seen when I was used to being invisible combined with the weight of what I knew about Tucker and the photos locked in my fire safe. I found myself doing breathing exercises in bathroom stalls between classes. 5 things I could see. 4 things I could touch. 3 things I could hear. The grounding techniques I'd learned from YouTube videos about anxiety, but I also noticed that being busy kept me from thinking too much about the photos and what to do with them. The constant assignments gave me a reason to focus on something concrete. Exposure settings and composition and lighting. Problems I knew how to solve. One night I spent 2 hours upgrading my data security. I created encrypted backups of the photos on 3 different flash drives using the free encryption software I downloaded. I uploaded copies to a secure cloud storage account with 2-factor authentication and a password I wrote down and hid in my physics textbook. The process of organizing and protecting the evidence made me feel less helpless. I was doing something productive even while waiting. I labeled each flash drive with innocuous names. Summer Photos 2023. Art Project Files. Portfolio Backup. I put one in my camera bag, one in my school locker behind my textbooks, and one in the fire safe with the negatives. Control through competence had always been my survival strategy. When I couldn't control what other people did, I could control how prepared I was. I could control my documentation and my backups and my plans. That night, I fell asleep with my laptop still warm on my desk, and 3 flash drives hidden in 3 different places, and the original negatives locked in my closet, and 1 set of prints filed between my landscape work and my portraits, waiting for me to decide when and how to use them. Wednesday after school, I grabbed my camera bag and headed to the football field for what I told myself was yearbook coverage. The bleachers were mostly empty except for a few girlfriends and some younger siblings doing homework. I sat 3 rows up on the visitor side where I could see everything without being obvious. Tucker moved through warm-up drills with this easy confidence that made everyone around him look smaller. When the coach called for passing drills, Tucker's throws were perfect spirals that landed exactly where they needed to. His teammates jogged to him for high fives. The assistant coach clapped him on the shoulder and said something that made Tucker grin. I lifted my camera and took a few shots, pretending I was documenting the team for yearbook spreads. Through the viewfinder, I watched how the other players deferred to him, how they waited for his approval before celebrating their own catches. The head coach spent most of practice watching Tucker specifically, adjusting plays around him, building strategies that showcased his arm. I thought about the scholarship offers stacked up for him, the playoff hopes riding on his performance, the alumni donations that came in when the team won. The athletic department had invested everything in Tucker's success. Nobody wanted to look too closely at what he did off the field. I took my photos and left before anyone could ask why the yearbook photographer was there on a Wednesday. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and trying to work through the ethics of what I had. The photos belonged to Alicia in one sense because they showed her being hurt, but they also belonged to the school because they showed a student being violent on campus. If I gave them to Alicia, she might use them for revenge or social leverage instead of protection. She could post them online to humiliate Tucker or trade them for some kind of power in their messed up dynamic. If I went straight to administration, I was taking away her choice about what happened with images of her most vulnerable moment. Nobody had asked her permission for me to photograph it. Nobody had asked if she wanted this documented. The ethical tension pulled me in different directions until my brain felt tangled. I rolled over and checked my phone. 2:47 in the morning. I put the phone face down and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. At 3, I gave up and opened my laptop to research mandatory reporting laws and victim advocacy protocols. The information made things more complicated, not less. Morning came with gray light through my window and a decision forming in my mind. I would not confront Tucker directly. The thought had crossed my mind a few times. Some fantasy of showing him the photos and watching his face change when he realized someone had evidence. But that was stupid and dangerous. Tucker was physically stronger than me. He was socially protected by the football program and his popularity. He had already shown he got violent when challenged. My safety mattered more than some dramatic confrontation that would probably just make things worse. Being smart mattered more than being brave in ways that got me hurt. I would work through proper channels even if it took longer and felt more frustrating. I would document everything carefully and build a case that adults couldn't ignore. I would be strategic instead of impulsive. The decision settled something in my chest that had been churning all night. By the end of the second week, Alicia's pattern became completely predictable. In the hallways when popular kids were around, she threw her arm over my shoulders and talked about how close we were. She tagged me in Instagram stories about family and loyalty. She made sure people saw us together when it benefited her image. But in private moments, in the library or the parking lot or anywhere without an audience, she walked past me like I didn't exist. She didn't make eye contact. She didn't acknowledge me at all. I had moved past feeling angry about it into this numb tolerance. This was who Alicia was and probably always would be. She used people when they were useful and discarded them when they weren't. My energy went into documenting the evidence and planning my next steps, not into hoping she would suddenly value family over social currency. I took photos at the track meet on Saturday and watched her perform her usual routine. When her friends were watching, I was her beloved cousin. When they looked away, I became invisible again. I packed up my camera and left without saying goodbye. Monday of the third week, I got to the school early and went straight to the art department. The professional scanner sat in the corner of the advanced photography room, the kind that cost thousands of dollars and could capture every detail of a negative. I locked the door and pulled out the envelope with the parking lot photos. The scanner took almost 10 minutes per negative to create the high-resolution files. I saved each one with embedded data showing the date and exact time. The file properties recorded when the original photo was taken, when it was developed, when it was scanned. I logged everything in a spiral notebook I kept just for this. Photo 1, taken April 10th at 9:23 p.m., developed April 11th, scanned April 22nd. Photo 2, same sequence. I documented who had seen them, which was just me. I wrote down where the originals were stored, locked in my fire safe at home. Chain of custody mattered if this ever became official. I was treating it like the serious evidence it was. When I finished, I had 3 flash drives with encrypted backups and a detailed paper trail. I put one drive in my camera bag, one in my school locker behind my textbooks, and one I would take home to put with the negatives. Control through preparation had always been my way of handling things I couldn't directly fix. Film club met that afternoon in the media center after last period. We watched a student documentary about skateboarding culture and discussed camera angles and editing choices. Raphael sat next to me and kept glancing over like he wanted to say something. When the meeting ended and everyone else filed out, he touched my elbow. I stopped and waited. He asked if I was okay because I seemed stressed lately. The careful way he asked made it clear he wouldn't push if I didn't want to talk. I gave him a version without specific details. I had evidence of something bad happening. I didn't know whether to report it or handle it differently. I was scared of what might happen if I did either thing. Raphael nodded and didn't ask for more information. He just said that whatever I decided, I should make sure I wasn't alone when I did it. The simple advice made me feel less isolated, like someone was paying attention even if they didn't know the full story. I thanked him and we walked out together, talking about normal things like the upcoming film festival and whether we should submit our projects. The next day at lunch, I sat at my usual table near the windows with my sandwich and my camera. Across the cafeteria, I could see Tucker and Piper at a table with some sophomores. I watched Tucker stand up when another guy approached and tried to talk to Piper. Tucker moved between them, his body language casual but blocking. He steered Piper toward the exit, his hand on her lower back, possessive and controlling. She looked anxious, her shoulders tight, her smile forced. When her friends tried to follow, Tucker said something that made them stop. I recognized the pattern because I had seen it with Alicia before the parking lot incident. The subtle isolation, the monitoring, the control disguised as attention. My concern shifted from abstract worry to active alarm. Tucker was doing to Piper exactly what he had done before things got violent. I lifted my camera and took a few shots through the window, documenting the body language and the isolation. The photos wouldn't show anything obviously wrong to someone who didn't know what to look for. But I knew, and that knowledge sat heavy in my stomach for the rest of the day. That evening, I was scrolling through Instagram when a message request popped up. No profile picture. The account name was just random letters and numbers. Created today according to the profile. No posts, no followers, no following. The message said, "Stay out of it if you know what's good for you." My heart started hammering against my ribs. I screenshot the threat immediately, my hands shaking so much it took 3 tries to get a clear image. I saved it to my evidence folder on my laptop and backed it up to the cloud. Someone knew I had something. Someone was watching me closely enough to know I was a threat, which meant I wasn't as invisible as I thought. The threatening message proved that my documentation was dangerous enough to worry someone. I spent an hour checking my privacy settings and making sure my accounts were locked down. Then I added a note to my evidence log about the threat, complete with timestamp and screenshot. Everything documented, everything backed up, everything prepared for when I finally decided to act. Between classes the next day, Alicia cornered me by my locker. She had this fake friendly smile and her voice was too loud, performing for the people walking past. She said she could introduce me to some college guys at prom if I wanted. Her older friends from state would be there as dates for some seniors. She made it sound like she was doing me this huge favor, finally giving me access to the social world she had kept me out of for 4 years. The implication was crystal clear even though she never said it directly. Keep quiet about whatever I knew and she would finally give me the social capital she had withheld freshman year. Stop making things complicated and she would let me into her world. I looked at her performing this generous cousin act and felt nothing except tired contempt. I closed my locker and walked away without responding. Her voice followed me down the hall, still too loud, trying to make it look like we were having a normal, friendly conversation. I kept walking until I couldn't hear her anymore. After school, I went to the yearbook office where Jen was grading papers at her desk. I knocked on the doorframe and asked if she had a minute. She put down her pen and gestured to the chair across from her. I framed it as a hypothetical because I wasn't ready to show her the actual photos yet. If a student had evidence of something serious happening to another student, what was the ethical way to handle it? Jen leaned back in her chair and thought for a moment before answering. She explained that teachers were mandatory reporters, which meant if I showed her evidence of violence, she was legally required to report it to administration. The decision would be out of my hands at that point. She suggested talking to Kelly, the counselor, first if I needed to think through my options before triggering official processes. Kelly could help me understand what would happen and what my choices were. Jen's tone was careful and supportive, not pushing me to do anything specific, but making sure I understood the consequences of each path. I thanked her and left, my mind already working through what it would mean to talk to Kelly versus going straight to administration versus continuing to wait. The weight of that conversation followed me out of Jen's office and down the empty hallway. My backpack felt heavier than it should, like the decision itself had physical mass pressing against my shoulders. Once I showed those photos to any adult with authority, the choice would be gone. The machinery would start moving whether I was ready or not. I could still wait. I could still control the timing. But the responsibility of that control sat in my chest like a stone. That night, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, running through scenarios until my brain felt worn out. What if I waited too long and something bad happened? What if I moved too fast and made everything worse? Sleep came late and restless. The next morning, I woke up early with a clear purpose. I went to my computer and searched for local teen domestic violence resources. Found a hotline number designed specifically for people my age. Printed it on a small card, plain white paper, just the number and the words, "You deserve support." Nothing else. No name, no message, just information. I folded it twice and tucked it into my jacket pocket before school. Between first and second period, I walked past Piper's locker 3 times, waiting until the hallway cleared. When no one was looking, I knelt down like I was tying my shoe. Slipped the card through the vent slots at the bottom of her locker door where only she would find it. My heart pounded the whole time. It felt like such a small thing, a card with a phone number. But it was something. A resource without forcing a conversation. A way to help without taking away her choice. By lunch, the whispers started. I noticed it first in the cafeteria line when 2 junior girls looked at me and then away too quickly. One of them said something to the other behind her hand. In the hallway after 4th period, someone made a comment about me, always lurking with that camera. By the end of the day, the rumor had spread enough that I heard different versions of it. Creepy photographer. Takes pictures without permission. Always watching people. Someone said I had photos of everyone stored somewhere. Someone else said I was obsessed with documenting private moments. The social blowback stung worse than I expected. It was designed to make people distrust me before I could say anything that mattered. make me seem weird and invasive so nobody would believe my evidence. But I reminded myself that I had been invisible for 3 years. Survived being nobody. I could handle being labeled the weird camera girl for 3 more weeks until graduation. That evening, I went to the yearbook office to grab my backup lens for a weekend shoot. The second I opened my camera bag, I knew something was wrong. The placement was off. Zippers not quite how I left them. I pulled everything out with shaking hands. The landscape prints I had left visible on top were gone. Someone had been through my stuff, looking for something specific. My hands trembled as I checked every pocket and compartment, but the real negatives were safe at home in my fire safe. The prints they took were just decoys, random landscape shots from a class project. Still, the violation made my stomach turn. Someone was actively trying to find and destroy evidence. Someone knew I had something worth stealing. I pulled out my phone and texted Jen immediately. "Can I store something important in your locked filing cabinet? We'll explain later." She responded within minutes. "Of course. Come by tomorrow before first period." I barely slept that night. Kept thinking about someone going through my things, wondering who it was. Tucker himself or someone doing his dirty work. Either way, it confirmed that I was right to be scared. Right to be careful. The next morning, I arrived at the school 40 minutes early. The hallways were empty except for a few teachers. I had the original negatives in a manila envelope, sealed tight. Went straight to Jen's office. She was already there grading papers with a coffee mug steaming on her desk. I closed the door behind me. She looked up and saw my face and immediately put down her pen. I handed her the envelope without explaining what was inside. We sealed it together with clear tape across the flap. Then we both signed our names across the seal and wrote the date. She took it to her filing cabinet, unlocked it, and placed the envelope in the back of the bottom drawer, locked it again, and put the key in her desk. The physical act of securing the originals with a witness made me feel safer and more committed at the same time. No going back now. During passing period before third period, I was walking to my locker when Tucker appeared. He came from the opposite direction, walking straight toward me in the crowded hallway. My heart started racing before he even got close. He passed right by me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, leaned in slightly and said quietly, "See you at prom, picture girl." His voice was smooth and his smirk made my skin crawl. Then he kept walking like nothing happened. My heart hammered in my chest. I reminded myself that he didn't actually know what I had. He was guessing, fishing, trying to intimidate me into staying quiet. But the veiled threat told me he suspected something, which meant the situation was moving faster than I had planned, escalating beyond my control. That afternoon, the entire senior class got called to an emergency assembly in the gym. We filed in confused, everyone whispering about what it could be. Assistant Principal Declan stood at the center with a microphone and waited for us to settle. Then he announced new conduct policies for prom. Mandatory phone checks at the door. Increased chaperone presence throughout the venue. Stricter consequences for rule violations. He cited recent concerns about student safety without giving details. Several seniors around me groaned about the phone policy, complained about being treated like children, but I felt cautiously hopeful. Administration was taking threats seriously, even if they didn't know about my specific evidence. The increased supervision might actually prevent something bad from happening. Late that night, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when a DM notification popped up. From Piper. My heart jumped. I opened it immediately. She wrote, "Thank you for the card. I found it in my locker. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, feeling something lift in my chest. She found the resource. She was reaching out. She was considering that she needed help. I typed back right away, suggesting we meet after school the next day somewhere private. She agreed to the art studio. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. This was progress. Small and fragile, but real. The next afternoon, I got to the art studio early and waited by the windows. Piper showed up right on time, looking nervous. We sat at one of the work tables in the back corner where no one could see us from the hallway. She talked and I listened. Told me about Tucker's patterns. How he checked her phone constantly. Got angry when she talked to other guys even in normal friend ways. Pressured her about physical stuff she wasn't ready for. Made threats about what would happen if she embarrassed him at prom. Her voice shook while she talked, but she kept going. Said she wasn't ready to make an official report because she was scared of retaliation. Scared nobody would believe her over the football captain. I listened with empathy but didn't push. Understood that she needed to move at her own pace even though I wanted to protect her faster. Told her I believed her. Told her she deserved better. Gave her space to process without forcing decisions. That evening, I was doing homework when my phone buzzed with another DM. This time from Alicia. She sent me a screenshot thread of messages from Tucker. I scrolled through them, feeling my stomach tighten. Manipulative texts about what we had and you know you miss me. Veiled threats about the video he claimed to have. Demands that she be nice to him at prom or face consequences. At the bottom, she wrote, "Don't tell anyone I showed you this." I stared at my phone, feeling the pull to work with her against him. But I recognized it immediately as another manipulation. She wanted to use me without giving me permission to actually do anything. Wanted to keep control while making me carry the emotional weight. Wanted sympathy and support, but on her terms only. I screenshot the conversation for my records but didn't respond. Wasn't going to let her pull me into her games while real safety was at stake. The next morning, I walked to Kelly's office during study hall and knocked on the doorframe. She looked up from her computer and waved me in, closing the door behind me before gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I sat down and pulled out my phone with the screenshots ready. My hands felt steady even though my heart was beating fast. I explained that I had photos of someone being hurt, that the person wasn't ready to make a report yet, and that there was a possible problem at prom coming up soon. Kelly listened without interrupting and took notes on a yellow pad. When I finished talking, she set down her pen and outlined 3 different paths I could take. First option was anonymous flagging, where she would alert administration about a safety concern without using my name, which would trigger some kind of investigation but keep me out of it. Second option was a formal report where I provided my evidence directly, which would create a stronger case but would expose me as the source. Third option was focusing on a safety plan for prom itself, adding more supervision and monitoring without starting a full investigation right away. Each option had trade-offs. Anonymous meant less protection for people who needed it. Formal meant I became a target. Safety plan meant dealing with the immediate threat but not the bigger pattern. I told her I needed time to think about it and she said that was fine, but to decide soon since prom was only days away. I thanked her and left feeling like I had more information, but not more clarity. At lunch, I spotted Alicia sitting alone at a table near the windows, scrolling through her phone with her lunch tray untouched. I walked over and sat down across from her before I could change my mind. She looked up with surprise and started to say something, but I cut her off. I told her directly that I wasn't going to sit on evidence if someone was actively in danger, and that her need to control how she looked to other people didn't matter more than Piper's safety. Her face went through several expressions: shock first, and then anger. She argued that I was being way too dramatic about everything, that I didn't understand the full situation, that I was making things worse by getting involved. She tried the guilt angle next, talking about family loyalty and how I was supposed to have her back no matter what. I stayed calm even though my stomach felt tight. I repeated that I wasn't keeping secrets that helped someone hurt other people, and that she needed to decide if she cared more about her image or about doing the right thing. Then I stood up and walked away before she could say anything else that might make me second-guess myself. My legs felt shaky, but I kept walking. After school, I met Raphael in the parking lot and we drove to the hotel where prom was being held. The venue coordinator let us in to check the space since Raphael said we were from the yearbook committee doing advanced planning. We walked through the ballroom and Raphael pulled out his phone to sketch a basic map. He marked which areas had good sight lines where teachers could see everything, which corners were hidden behind decorative columns, where the exits were located. We figured out a simple plan for how I could stay in well-monitored spaces during prom, how to signal an adult quickly if something seemed wrong, which areas Piper should avoid being alone in. Raphael asked practical questions about what I was worried might happen without pushing me to explain why. His help made me feel prepared instead of just scared. When we finished mapping everything out, I felt grateful for his friendship that didn't require me to explain everything or justify my concerns. He just helped and trusted that I had good reasons. That evening, I was sitting on my bed doing homework when my phone started buzzing with notifications. I opened Instagram and saw that someone had tagged me in a post. My stomach dropped when I saw what it was. Someone had taken my face from my profile photo and photoshopped it onto a body in an embarrassing pose, captioned with, "Creepy stalker photographer always watching." The post already had dozens of likes and comments. People were sharing it to their stories, making jokes about me. The shame burned hot in my chest and my face felt flushed. I wanted to delete my entire account and disappear. But then I remembered that I had been invisible for 3 years and survived it. I had learned how to exist in spaces where people didn't notice me. I could survive being visible in an ugly way for a few more days. The humiliation campaign was meant to make me back down and discredit me before prom. I screenshot the post from my evidence folder and then closed the app. I wouldn't let them see it working. Late that night, I was lying in bed trying to sleep when my chest started feeling tight. My breathing got faster and more shallow. My heart was racing and my hands started shaking. The panic came up fast and hard. I sat up and tried to remember the grounding techniques I had learned from my early morning gym routine when I used to get anxious before workouts. 5 things I could see: my camera on the desk, the poster on my wall, my backpack by the door, the lamp on my nightstand, my reflection in the mirror. 4 things I could touch: the soft blanket, the cool pillowcase, the smooth phone case, the rough carpet under my feet. 3 things I could hear: the heater running, a car passing outside, my own breathing starting to slow down. The anxiety moved through me in waves instead of drowning me completely. My breathing regulated gradually and my hands stopped shaking as much. I recognized that my years of building skills and competence had given me tools for exactly this kind of crisis. I could handle hard things. I had been handling hard things for years. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Piper. She had forwarded me a message that Tucker had sent her at 2 in the morning. I opened it and read his words. "Wear the blue dress tomorrow night and smile pretty. Don't make me remind you what happens when you embarrass me." The threat was specific and clear. He was telling her exactly how to behave at prom and implying consequences if she didn't obey. I screenshot the message immediately and saved it to 3 different places. My concern shifted from abstract worry to concrete action. This was real evidence of him pressuring and threatening her. Adults needed to see this. I texted Piper back asking if she was okay, and if she felt safe. She responded that she was scared, but didn't know what to do. I told her I was going to show the message to people who could help, and asked if that was okay. She said yes. During lunch period, I found Jen in the yearbook office and asked if Declan was available. She made a quick call, and 5 minutes later, we were all sitting in Declan's office with the door closed. I showed them the threatening text from Tucker to Piper, along with my photos from the parking lot. I explained the full timeline of what I had witnessed and when I had documented it. They both looked serious while I talked. Declan's face got harder when he saw the photos of Tucker grabbing Alicia's throat. When I finished explaining everything, Declan said they would add extra chaperones at prom specifically watching Tucker, and would brief all the supervising teachers on what to look for. Jen squeezed my shoulder and said, "You did the right thing bringing this to us." Her words made me feel supported. Competent adults were taking this seriously. They weren't dismissing it as drama or overreaction. They were treating it like the real safety issue it was. 2 nights before prom, I was scrolling through Instagram before bed when I saw that Alicia had posted a new photo. It was a throwback picture of her and Tucker from months ago when they were still together, both of them smiling at some party. She had tagged him in it with a caption about what could have been, and a sad face emoji. I stared at my phone, feeling frustration build in my chest. Her need to perform and manipulate was actively making the safety plans harder. She was playing social chess and trying to get attention, or make Tucker jealous or reclaim some narrative about their relationship. Meanwhile, Piper was actually scared and trying to survive. The contrast made me angry. Alicia was still treating this like it was about her image and social status, instead of about people getting hurt. Late that same night, my phone buzzed with a new Instagram message. I opened it and saw it was from Tucker. My heart jumped. The message said, "I know you have pics from the parking lot. Would be a shame if your camera got broken before you could use them." Fear hit me immediately and sharp. He was confirming that he knew about the evidence. He was making direct threats about destroying it and probably threatening me too. My hands shook while I took screenshots of the message. I forced myself to think clearly through the panic. I forwarded the screenshots to both Jen and Declan right away, with a brief message explaining what had just happened. Then I made sure all my backup copies of everything were secure in multiple locations. The fear was real, but I wasn't going to let it stop me from following through. The morning before prom, I went to Kelly's office first thing and told her I was ready to file an official report. She pulled out the proper forms and I provided copies of everything. The photos from the parking lot showing Tucker hurting Alicia. The threatening messages he had sent to both Piper and me. My documentation log with dates and times of everything I had witnessed. A written statement explaining the full context and timeline. My hands shook while I signed the forms at the bottom. Fear and determination mixed together in my chest. I knew this was the right thing to do, even though it scared me. Kelly looked at everything carefully, and then filed it all in a locked cabinet. She assured me that the school would take immediate steps to make sure prom was safe, and that my evidence would be handled privately through proper channels. She explained that they would also be contacting Piper's parents and Alicia's parents to make sure everyone was informed and protected. I left her office feeling drained but also relieved that it was finally out of my hands, and in the hands of people who could actually do something about it. By midday, I was standing in the hallway outside Declan's office, watching through the glass window as he interviewed Alicia. She sat with her arms crossed tight over her chest, and her shoulders hunched forward like she was trying to make herself smaller. I could see her shaking her head and gesturing with one hand, while Declan leaned forward across his desk. Her mouth moved fast, and I knew she was minimizing what happened because that's what she always did when things got real. She probably called it just a fight, or said I was overreacting, or insisted she could handle it herself. Declan pulled out some papers and slid them across the desk toward her. Her face changed completely when she looked down at whatever he was showing her. The defensive anger melted into something that looked like fear mixed with surprise. He was probably showing her Piper's statement about the pattern of Tucker's behavior. Alicia's hands went to her face and she sat there for a long moment not moving. Then Declan started talking again, and I watched her nod slowly a few times. She didn't look happy about whatever they were agreeing to, but she was agreeing, which was more than I expected. When she finally stood up to leave, I turned and walked away fast so she wouldn't see me watching. That afternoon, Piper sat across from Kelly in the counseling office with her hands twisted together in her lap. I was in the waiting area outside because Kelly had asked me to stay nearby in case Piper needed support. Through the partially open door, I could hear Piper's voice shaking as she talked about Tucker's behavior over the past few months. She described how he checked her phone constantly and got angry when she talked to other guys. How he pressured her about physical stuff she wasn't ready for. How he sent that threatening text about what to wear and how to act at prom. Her voice kept breaking, but she pushed through and kept talking. I felt less alone listening to her find that scared courage to speak up, even though she was clearly worried about what Tucker might do when he found out. Kelly's calm voice responded with questions and reassurance. She explained that extra chaperones would be watching specifically for any concerning behavior at prom. She told Piper she could change her mind about going if she felt unsafe, and that wouldn't be a problem at all. When Piper finally came out of the office, her eyes were red, but she looked a little bit lighter somehow. Late that afternoon, I was walking past the administrative offices when I saw Declan talking to the football coach through the window. The coach stood with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. He He kept shaking his head and gesturing toward the hallway like he was arguing about something. Declan stayed calm and professional but firm. He pulled out his phone and showed the coach something on the screen. The coach's face went red and he started talking faster with bigger gestures. I could tell he was worried about how this situation would affect the team and Tucker's scholarship to state. The whole conversation felt political and protective in a way that made my stomach tense up. Institutional protection of star athletes was real, and I knew it might make everything harder. But at least the information was out there now. Multiple adults knew what was happening, and that felt better than keeping it all locked in my fire safe at home. At the end of the school day, I was walking down the hallway near the gym when Tucker appeared from around the corner. He stepped directly into my path and moved close enough that I had to stop walking. His body language was meant to scare me, and it worked. My heart started beating faster, and my hands went cold. He leaned down slightly so his face was level with mine, and his voice came out quiet and mean. He said I was going to regret getting involved in things that didn't concern me. Before I could figure out how to respond, a teacher rounded the corner behind him, asking if everything was okay. Tucker's whole face changed instantly into a friendly smile. He stepped back and said we were just talking about yearbook photos. The teacher looked between us for a second, then nodded and kept walking. Tucker gave me one more look before he turned and walked away toward the gym. My fear was still there, but the relief of that teacher showing up exactly when needed made my resolve get harder instead of softer. Tucker was showing exactly who he was, and I wasn't backing down now. After school, I met with Jen in the yearbook office. She closed the door and we sat at the work table surrounded by layout pages and photo proofs. She talked to me about ethics and boundaries in a way that felt like she was trying to help me think clearly instead of just telling me what to do. She explained that I couldn't publicly release the photos without Alicia's permission because they showed her being hurt, and that was her story to control. My priority had to be keeping people safe, not getting revenge or trying to create some big social justice moment. I needed to let the adults handle the enforcement part while I focused on documentation if it became necessary. Her guidance helped me feel less tangled up in competing feelings about what I owed Alicia versus what I owed Piper versus what I owed myself. I wasn't trying to destroy Tucker or save Alicia. I was trying to prevent someone from getting hurt at prom tomorrow night. That clarity made everything feel more manageable. That evening, my phone buzzed twice in quick succession. Both messages were from Alicia. The first one said, "Don't you dare show those pictures to anyone else." I stared at it feeling annoyed because I'd already shown them to the people who needed to see them. Then 5 minutes later, another message came through saying thank you for telling someone. The two conflicting texts showed she was fighting with herself about whether to be angry or grateful. She wanted to maintain control over the situation while also feeling relieved that adults were finally involved and taking it seriously. I felt my old bitterness toward her soften just a little bit into something more like tired empathy. She was still manipulative and self-centered and probably always would be. But she was also genuinely scared, and that was a human thing I could understand, even if I didn't forgive all the ways she'd treated me over the years. Late that evening, I sat on my bedroom floor and laid out all my camera gear for prom. I packed fresh batteries and 3 memory cards into my bag. I cleaned my lens and checked that everything was working properly. But while I did all this, I made a firm decision about how I would handle tomorrow night. I would only take photos if something was actively happening that needed to be documented, and I would alert adults first before raising my camera. My role at prom was photographer second and witness first. People's safety mattered more than getting the perfect shot for yearbook. The calm readiness I felt was different from my usual detached observation mode. This time I was choosing to be present and engaged instead of hiding behind my lens. Prom started with chaperones standing in obvious positions all around the venue. Declan was stationed near the main entrance. 2 other teachers were posted by the emergency exits. A parent volunteer sat at a table by the bathrooms. They were enforcing the phone policy strictly at the door with a basket for students to deposit their phones, though I noticed several people sneaking theirs past the check by hiding them in purses or jacket pockets. The first hour passed with normal prom energy. People danced in groups on the floor. Couples posed for photos at the backdrop. Girls went to the bathroom in packs to fix their makeup and talk. Guys stood around the edges making jokes and rating people's outfits. The DJ played the expected mix of current hits and old songs that everyone knew the words to. But I stayed alert the whole time instead of relaxing into the party atmosphere. I tracked where Tucker was and made sure Piper had clear sightlines to adults whenever he was near her. My whole body felt tense and ready, like I was waiting for something bad to happen. I wasn't here to have fun or take cute photos for my own memories. I was here to watch and be ready. Midway through the evening, I saw Tucker walking toward Alicia near the refreshment table. He said something to her and gestured toward the exit doors. She shook her head and stepped back. He moved closer and said something else. She shook her head again, more firmly this time. Then he grabbed her arm and started pulling her toward the door. I saw his hand tighten around her wrist and her face showed clear fear. My heart started pounding hard, but I forced myself to act instead of freezing. I caught Declan's eye across the room and pointed toward Tucker and Alicia. Then I raised my camera and took 3 quick shots of Tucker pulling her and her trying to resist. Just enough to document what was happening without turning it into some exploitative photo essay of her fear. My hands shook while I held the camera, but I made myself stay focused and decisive. Declan and 2 other chaperones moved fast across the room. They reached Tucker and Alicia within seconds. Declan put his hand on Tucker's shoulder and said something I couldn't hear over the music. Tucker let go of Alicia's arm and started arguing loudly. I could see his mouth moving and his face getting red. One of the other chaperones guided Alicia away toward a private room. Declan and the third chaperone walked Tucker toward the exit, still talking to him in that calm, firm way adults use when they're not going to change their minds. Tucker kept gesturing and talking, but they didn't stop moving. They took him to a small office near the entrance, and I saw them confiscate his phone before closing the door. 5 minutes later, they walked him out to the parking lot, and his night was over. I lowered my camera, and my whole body started shaking with adrenaline release. My hands trembled, and my legs felt weak. Relief mixed with leftover fear in my chest, making it hard to breathe normally for a minute. But it was done. Tucker was gone, and Alicia was safe, and Piper could actually enjoy the rest of her prom without watching over her shoulder. Kelly appeared beside Piper within minutes, and guided her to a quiet corner near the coat check area. I watched from a distance as Piper sat in a folding chair and started talking, her hands moving as she explained what she'd seen and what she'd been dealing with. Her voice sounded clearer now, stronger than the shaky whispers I'd heard from her over the past weeks. Kelly took notes on her phone and nodded, asking questions I couldn't hear, but that seemed to help Piper organize her thoughts. The whole conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes, and by the end, Piper's shoulders looked less tense, even though tears streaked her makeup. Meanwhile, Declan came back inside and found Alicia standing against the wall near the bathrooms, her whole body shaking like she was cold even though the venue was warm. He spoke to her quietly, and she nodded, letting him guide her toward the same private office where they'd taken Tucker earlier. I saw her face as she walked past, and it looked stripped of all the performance she usually wore, just raw fear and exhaustion. 2 other girls from her friend group started to follow, but a chaperone gently redirected them, explaining Alicia needed space to calm down. The fragility I saw in both Piper and Alicia felt more real than anything else that had happened tonight, like watching people drop the masks they wore every day at the school. I felt grateful they were both getting actual support from adults who knew what to do, even if the whole situation was complicated and messy and nowhere near resolved. The prom continued around us, but the energy had shifted from celebration to gossip and speculation. People clustered in groups whispering about what they'd seen, taking videos on phones they'd smuggled past the check, creating their own versions of events that would spread through social media before the night ended. I put my camera away in my bag and found a chair near the wall where I could just sit and let my adrenaline finish draining. My hands still shook a little, and my heart rate was only slowly returning to normal. Around 11 o'clock, 2 security officers showed up and talked to Declan in the hallway outside the main room. I saw them gesture toward the office where they were keeping my evidence copies, and Declan nodded and led them that direction. 20 minutes later, Kelly found me and asked if I could come give a statement and hand over my documentation. We went to a small administrative office that smelled like old coffee and cleaning products. The security officers were there along with someone they introduced as the police liaison who worked with the school district. I pulled out the manila envelope I'd prepared with copies of everything, photos printed on photo paper, screenshots of the threatening messages, my documentation log showing dates and times and chain of custody. The police liaison went through each item carefully while one security officer took notes. Then she pulled out an official form and had me sign it, explaining this showed when I collected the evidence, how I stored it, who had access, and when I turned it over to authorities. My signature looked shaky on the paper, but I got it done. The whole process took almost an hour, and by the end I felt completely drained, like all the energy had leaked out of my body. But I also felt steady in a weird way, knowing I'd done what I could with the information I had, and that proper authorities were now handling it. It wasn't my responsibility to carry alone anymore. Monday morning, I walked into school and immediately felt the difference in the air. Tucker wasn't there, which I already knew, because Declan had emailed my parents Sunday night to let them know Tucker was suspended pending a full investigation. But knowing it and experiencing it were different things. The hallways felt lighter without his presence, but they also felt charged with gossip and speculation. By second period, I'd overheard at least 5 different versions of what happened at prom, most of them wrong or exaggerated. Some people were saying Tucker got suspended for fighting with Alicia. Others claimed he'd been drinking or doing drugs. A few had somehow heard it was about threatening behavior but didn't know the details. The school was split pretty clearly into 2 camps. One group thought Tucker was being unfairly targeted, that he was a good guy who'd made some mistakes and didn't deserve to lose his scholarship over drama. The other group whispered that they'd always known something was off about him, that he gave them bad vibes, that they believed the girls who'd come forward. Nobody seemed to know I was the one who'd reported everything, but I felt exposed anyway because I'd been so visible at prom with my camera. I caught people looking at me in the hallways and whispering, probably trying to figure out what I'd seen or what I knew. The mixed feelings in my chest were hard to sort through. Relief that Tucker wasn't in the building, that Piper and Alicia could walk around without watching for him, but also this uncomfortable awareness that I was now connected to his suspension in ways I couldn't control. The social consequences of speaking up were real and immediate. Some kids I barely knew gave me dirty looks. Others went quiet when I walked past their lunch table. But it was manageable. Way more manageable than staying silent would have been. During that same week, Alicia and I existed in this weird limbo where we were both at the school, but never quite looked at each other. She'd turn her head when she saw me coming down the hallway, find something fascinating to look at in her locker, take the long way to her next class to avoid passing me. I understood it, sort of. She was embarrassed or angry or just didn't know what to say. Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from her. I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry I put you in that position. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over. It wasn't a real apology, not for the 4 years of denying we were related or treating me like I was invisible. It wasn't acknowledgement of how she'd manipulated the situation or tried to use me. But it was something. A tiny crack in the defensive pride she'd built around herself since freshman year. I didn't respond right away because I honestly didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to text back something cutting about how she'd only apologized because things had gotten bad enough that she needed help. Another part felt tired of holding on to anger that didn't actually make anything better. I needed time to figure out if I even wanted to rebuild any kind of relationship with her, or if the healthiest thing was to just stay cousins at family dinners and strangers at the school. Throughout that week, I got reactions from all directions, and they were exhausting to navigate. Some people thanked me quietly for speaking up, usually girls who'd had their own bad experiences with guys who pushed boundaries. They'd catch me after class or in the library and say things like, "I'm glad someone finally said something," or, "That took guts." Those moments felt good, but also heavy because I could see in their faces that they were carrying their own stories. But other people made it very clear they thought I'd done something wrong. I got called a snitch in the bathroom between classes, overheard people saying I'd ruined Tucker's scholarship over stupid drama, saw subtweets about how some people couldn't mind their own business. The hurt from being labeled a traitor to the school spirit was real and sharp. This was a small school where athletics mattered and Tucker had been the star, so turning him in felt like betraying the team to some people. But I set firm boundaries by refusing to engage in arguments about whether I'd been right to report. When someone tried to confront me about it in the hallway, I just said, "I'm not discussing this," and walked away. When I saw subtweets clearly about me, I didn't respond or defend myself. My energy went into finishing my yearbook assignments and preparing for final exams, not into convincing people who'd already decided I was wrong. I couldn't control what they thought, and trying to would just drain me more. By the end of the week, the yearbook committee had an emergency meeting to figure out how to handle prom coverage. We sat in Jen's classroom after school, 8 of us around the big work table, and Jen opened the discussion by saying we needed to decide what was ethical and appropriate to publish. Some people argued we should include everything because it was news and part of the historical record of senior year. Others said we shouldn't mention the incident at all because it would embarrass the people involved. I stayed quiet for most of the debate, just listening and thinking. Finally, I spoke up and said we shouldn't publish any photos from the confrontation, because that would be exploiting Alicia's trauma and Piper's fear for shock value. But I also said we could do something educational, something that acknowledged what happened without sensationalizing it. I drafted a short anonymized sidebar about consent, healthy relationships, and campus resources for students experiencing dating violence. It didn't name anyone or describe specific events, just offered information and support. Jen read it over and made a few small edits. Then the committee voted and everyone agreed to include it in the final layout. The sidebar would go on a page near the prom photos, turning my experience into something that might actually help someone without exploiting anyone's trauma. That felt right, like I'd found a way to use what happened for something good. That weekend, the film club had its end-of-year showcase at a local community center, and my landscape photography short film was scheduled to screen. I almost didn't go because I was exhausted from the drama of the past 2 weeks and didn't want to be around people. But Raphael texted me saying he'd saved me a seat and I should come see my work on a real screen instead of just my laptop. The community center had a small theater room with maybe 50 seats, and about 30 people showed up, including some parents and a few teachers. My film was third in the lineup. 5 minutes of footage I'd shot during hikes over the past year, landscapes and nature shots edited to music I'd found on a Creative Commons site. Watching it on the big screen felt surreal, like seeing my own vision reflected back in a way that made it feel real and valid. When it ended, people actually clapped. Not just polite applause, but genuine appreciation. A couple of people came up to me afterward and said specific things they'd liked about the composition or the editing choices. I deliberately redirected attention to my craft and my artistic vision, reminding myself and everyone else that I was more than just the girl who reported Tucker. The quiet pride I felt in my creative work helped balance out the social complications of the past month. This was who I actually was, someone who made things and saw beauty, and worked hard to get better at my skills. The following week, Piper sat down at my lunch table without asking if it was okay, just set her tray down across from me and said hi. We had this careful conversation that felt like we were both testing whether we could actually be friends or if the connection was just trauma bonding. She asked about my photography, and I asked about her interest in graphic design. We talked about composition and color theory and whether digital or traditional media was better for certain effects. The conversation felt fragile but real, based on actual shared interests and mutual respect instead of social convenience. Neither of us mentioned Tucker or prom or what had happened. We just talked about art in classes and what we were thinking about for summer. Before lunch ended, we made plans to work on a collaborative art project over the summer, maybe a zine or a photo series with graphic design elements. I felt cautiously optimistic about building a genuine connection with her, like maybe something good could come out of all the mess. After school that same week, Raphael found me in the yearbook office and pushed a flyer across the table toward me. It was for a local youth art showcase that featured emerging photographers, submission deadline in 2 weeks. He said I should submit my portfolio because my work deserved to be seen beyond yearbook pages and school projects. I hesitated immediately, my self-doubt flaring up with all the usual questions about whether my work was actually good enough or if I was just decent compared to other high school students. Raphael didn't let me spiral, though. He pulled up the showcase's website and showed me previous year's featured artists, pointing out that my technical skills were just as strong and my artistic vision was more interesting than half of what they'd shown. He insisted that I at least try, that the worst thing that could happen was they'd say no, and I'd be exactly where I was now. I tentatively agreed to submit 3 pieces, feeling nervous but also kind of ready to let my photography speak for itself outside the context of school drama and personal relationships. Maybe it was time to see if my work could stand on its own merit. During that same week, Kelly called me down to her office during study hall and told me she'd connected Alicia with ongoing counseling services through the school's partnership with a local teen health center. Alicia had actually taken the first appointment, which surprised me more than it probably should have. She'd always been so invested in appearing perfect and put together that admitting she needed help seemed completely out of character. Kelly said the counseling was confidential, but she wanted me to know that Alicia was getting support, and she thanked me for bringing everything to light even though it had been complicated. I asked if Piper was also getting help, and Kelly confirmed she was, that both girls were working with professionals who specialized in relationship violence and trauma. Her guarded acceptance of support felt like a small step toward dealing with reality, instead of just managing her image. I didn't know if Alicia would actually stick with counseling or if she'd go to a few sessions and then decide she was fine. But at least she'd taken the first step, which was more than she'd been willing to do before everything came out. On Saturday, Alicia showed up at my house and we sat on the front porch steps with awkward space between us. She picked at her nail polish while I waited for her to start talking. Finally, she said we needed to figure out how to be cousins without making it weird for either of us. I suggested that at family stuff with our parents we could be normal relatives, but at the school we just lived separate lives without pretending to be close or pretending to hate each other. She looked relieved when I said it, like she'd been worried I'd demand we suddenly become best friends or something. We both agreed that having clear rules felt better than the fake performances or hostile silence we'd been doing for 4 years. The conversation only lasted maybe 15 minutes, but when she left, I felt like we'd actually solved something instead of just creating more drama. 2 weeks later, I was checking my email between classes when I saw a message from the youth art showcase. My hands shook a little while I opened it because I'd been trying not to think about whether they'd select my portfolio. The email said they were inviting me to submit work for the alumni exhibition in the fall. It wasn't some big trophy or grand prize, just an invitation to participate with other emerging photographers. But somehow that felt more real than flashy recognition would have. I forwarded the email to Raphael during lunch with a message thanking him for pushing me to submit, because I wouldn't have done it without his encouragement. He wrote back immediately with about 15 exclamation points and said we should celebrate after finals. I felt genuinely excited about having opportunities that had nothing to do with Tucker or Alicia or any of the drama that had consumed the last month of senior year. In the final week of school, I sat alone in the dark room developing my last roll of film from senior year. The chemical smell was familiar and comforting while I watched images emerge in the developing bath. I thought about how different I was from the invisible freshman Alicia had dismissed 4 years ago, with her flat iron and Instagram angles. I was visible now, but on my own terms. Not because I was popular or dramatic, but because I'd chosen to act when action mattered. The evidence from the parking lot was archived properly with the school. Tucker's case was moving through legal processes that would take months. Alicia was going to therapy, but she was still complicated and self-centered in a lot of ways. Piper was healing, but she'd carry scars from what Tucker did to her. Nothing was fixed or fair or wrapped up neatly. But I wasn't invisible anymore, and more importantly, I didn't want to be. The confidence I felt wasn't about everything being perfect. It was about knowing I could handle hard things, and that the skills I'd built over 4 years spoke louder than any social performance ever could. I hung the last strip of negatives to dry and turned off the darkroom light, ready for whatever came next. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Nothing too deep, just another small story from real life. Thanks for listening. It always feels like chatting with an old friend. Come back next time if you want to hang out again.